Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Goodwin with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Welcome to this week's History is Lunch program. We're in our home, the Craig H. Nielsen Auditorium, in the Museum of Mississippi History and Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, and we're streaming live on both Facebook and YouTube, where these videos are available to watch anytime afterwards. And if you've not already done so, would you please silence your cell phones? For those who are not able to make it to the Evers Lecture this spring, the video with Joy Ann Reed and Ebony Lumumba is now up on the department's YouTube channel. Reed had asked us not to post it until after she had finished with her book tour, but we are happy that it is now available. Our new temporary exhibit of rarely shown flags from the MDAH collection is open upstairs in the FedEx Exhibition Hall. Admission to that exhibit is free, as is admission to the museums for all History's Lunch attendees, so take advantage of that. We'll have the third annual Mississippi Makers Fest outside on the plaza here this Saturday, May the 11th, beginning at 10 a.m. with food trucks, arts and crafts vendors, and live music that will begin at 4 p.m. and conclude with our headliner, Christone Kingfish Ingram. And then I hope that you'll come back next week for History's Lunch, when we'll be joined by Kadada Williams, who will present The Devil Was Turned Loose, Terror and Survival in the War Against Reconstruction. Today, I am delighted to welcome back our friend, Ted Ownby, who will talk about a shooting on Capitol Street, 1887. That's my error, not his up there. Ted Ownby is Professor Emeritus of History and Southern Studies at the University of Mississippi, where from 2008 to 2019, he was Director of the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. He earned his BA from Vanderbilt University and his MA and PhD from Johns Hopkins University. Ownby is the author of 3 books, most recently Hurtin' Words, Debating Family Problems in the 20th Century South, and the editor or co-editor of multiple books, including the Mississippi Encyclopedia. I guess your last History is Lunch was for the publication of the Mississippi Encyclopedia. Help me welcome Ted Ownby.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. There's multiple reasons to be delighted to be here. One is I retired this past summer, so this is the first week in May, and everyone I've known for 35 years is grading final exams, but not me. So what a blast! I'm delighted also to be giving this talk in Jackson. Just about everything in this talk takes place in walking distance of where we are right now, and it's kind of, as a non-Jackson person, it's dramatic to drive and walk past one scene after another from this this work. Thanks to my friend Chris Goodwin, thanks to the 2 Mississippi Museums, and thanks to my friends at the Mississippi Department of Archive and History. I'm delighted to be here and still in awe of the 2 Mississippi Museums. This paper is a work in progress. This is my first time to talk about it in public. It's a chapter from a series of a work that's, I hope, will be a book, a series of chapters, kind of episodes in Mississippi history, taking a somewhat obscure story and trying to see, to tell the story and to see what themes in Mississippi history it illuminates. I will get there. That's me once again. That's Capitol Street off to the left. The shooting that I'll talk about is up on the top right, called the Town Creek Bridge on Capitol Street. Excuse me, it's between the railroad station and it's close to where West and Lamar cross Capitol Street. I drove down there today. It's all calm, but I'll have this and another couple of slides later. Thanks especially, before I get started talking about history, thanks especially to archivists here at the Mississippi Department of Archive and History. I've asked for so many obscure materials, Mississippi College, the Southern Baptist collection there, and then my colleagues at the University of Mississippi and Mississippi State University, and Louisiana State, and the WCTU archive in Chicago gave me reason to take a trip. I want to get started with a story. And the story starts a little bit like a movie where it starts in the middle or toward the end, so you know part of what happens, and then you want to see how we got there. I'm not sure that's the best strategy, but that's the one I'm choosing today. The story is probably a little bit more surprising. Late in April 1888, so the year after the shooting in 1887, several newspapers described celebrations when a jury in Rankin County found Jones Hamilton, this man, not guilty of murder. In Brandon, Rankin County, according to one newspaper, the verdict led to a scene beyond description. Old friends fell upon his neck and wept like children. Others pressed forward for a shake of his honest hand. In a few moments, news flashed across the wires in every direction. Preparations for the departure of himself and friends began. The scene on the streets reminded us of a Methodist camp meeting. All happy people shaking hands and rejoicing, and sinners looking down in the mouth. One newspaper heard that the celebration was the biggest demonstration ever in Brandon. Hundreds of people shouted themselves hoarse, but that's not all. Jones Hamilton and his wife Fanny Hamilton rode back to their home city of here in Jackson on a special train full of friends and a brass band. There are lots of brass bands who show up in my book, and we need more scholarship on 1800s brass bands. But the train reached the station down on Capitol Street at about 5 o'clock in the evening. Passengers were all inside and outside, hanging on the sides of platforms, the platforms on the boxes and tops of the train, crowded with passengers. Some businesses closed early so the residents could celebrate by handshaking and shouting. About 1,500 people welcomed the Hamiltons and cheered as they hurried next door to listen to Jones Hamilton speak from the balcony of the Edwards house. Jones Hamilton actually mentioned that he would like to go home and rest after a 50-day trial. No thanks, they said, please, we want more of you. The newspaper, excitement of the scene beggars description. There was never anything of its kind in the city since the war. The crowd composed of, quoting, crowds composed of all classes of our citizens, richest to poorest, whitest to blackest, Jew and Gentile, men, women, and children, all gathered in an impromptu mass to welcome home Colonel Hamilton, their friend and fellow citizen. That's not all. After an hour of that, the Hamiltons got in a carriage. The crowds followed them east on Capitol Street, over the Town Creek Bridge, next, past the St. Andrew's Church, his church, a church where he attended, past the governor's mansion, where someone he knew, up to State Street, right at the Capitol building, turned left on State Street to go north. If one tried this passage today by car, you'd go a little bit more slowly than they went then, but that's okay. Turned off on Jefferson Street and up to the large home in the neighborhood not yet then known as Bellhaven. The band played the entire route. People shouted themselves hoarse more again, deluged the hero with flowers. When they were finally home, Jones Hamilton made what a newspaper called a stirring speech. And here's some language that sets up, I hope, the rest of the paper. A stirring speech expressing thanks for the demonstration in his honor, telling of the manner in which he had been hounded and persecuted, saying that this public manifestation was made not just to him as an individual, but intended as a telling rebuke to the accursed fanaticism which had pursued him since his unfortunate trouble. Three of his lawyers, not too surprising here, three of his lawyers got up and spoke as well. The crowds finally left the scene, one and all pronouncing the day as the happiest of their lives. Let's assume that that's an exaggeration. The scene raises at least 4 questions, and I hope I'll have time for plenty of questions after I'm done. Who was this guy, Jones Hamilton, the defendant in the trial, the subject of such passion? What had he faced? What accusations? Who were the people he called accursed fanatics who were supposedly persecuting him? And then the more difficult question, why did this seem to matter so much to so many people? That's harder and open to more discussion. So who was he? Quickly, Jones Hamilton, before the murder trial, put him at the center of media attention in Mississippi, and the newspapers, in fact, covered this trial with extraordinary detail. Jones Hamilton had been involved in many things, but famous for one. Since the end of Reconstruction, the businesses of Jones Hamilton had received contracts from the state of Mississippi, from the legislature, to run the Mississippi Penitentiary. From that position, he profited by renting the labor of inexpensive convict workers to the owners of plantations, and especially to the companies that were building Mississippi's railroads. In that position, he became wealthy and controversial. He was on trial for the murder of Roderick Gambrell. That man, much younger man, on about 10 o'clock at night, May 5, 1887, Hamilton and Gambrell met on Town Creek Bridge on Capitol Street, about halfway, like I said, between the Capitol building and the railroad station. The two men shot each other. Both emptied all the bullets in their pistols. Hamilton walked to Gambrell on the ground and whipped him with his pistol. Roderick Gambrell died on the bridge. Hamilton received significant injuries. Sorry, I'm pointing to my abdomen and arm where he stumbled off the bridge, his coat still on fire, telling the first people he encountered, "That damned fellow has shot me." As the trial went along, he expanded that line to something that was a little bit more useful as part of a legal defense. As I said, telling the story became a subject of great public interest, daily newspaper coverage of all the witnesses. Was it an assassination? Was it a conspiracy? Was the meeting an accident? Was it a deadly coincidence? Who planned the meeting, if anyone? Was a point of dispute in the law and the press. Who shot first? Is it possible that Hamilton shot Gambrell in self-defense? The questions became powerful subjects for people to place their ideas about good and evil and innocence and guilt and power and martyrdom and religion, and ultimately also about race and government on who you believe and who you've supported. Back to those quick questions. The people that Jones Hamilton called accursed fanatics were the supporters of prohibition. From 1885 at age 19 until his death at age 22 on Capitol Street in 1887, Roderick Gambrell had edited Sword and Shield, the weekly publication of the Prohibition Union of Mississippi. He was 22 when he died. Pardon me as I edit. That's wrong. He was the son of J.B. Gambrell, a minister in Clinton. They'd just moved to Jackson. J.B. Gambrell was the editor of Mississippi's Southern Baptist Weekly, the Baptist Record. Roderick Gambrell's mother, Mary Gambrell, Mary T. Gambrell, wrote columns for the Baptist Record, columns on women and family life. And it is extraordinary to be studying somebody when you have their mother writing columns about parenthood. That's never happened in my career before. Both worked in Prohibition. Mary T. Gambrell was a leader of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in Jackson. At some point, the WCTU in Mississippi chose to make J.B. Gambrell and his brother, another Baptist minister, honorary members. So all three figures. In 1886, apologies for those of you who know this story, 1886, Jackson-Hinds County had its first local option election. Heated, controversial. All three Gambrells from Clinton and then moving to Jackson in 1886. All three were public figures in the campaign for Prohibition. On the other side, the first and only president of a group called the Central Anti-Prohibition Club of Jackson was Jones Hamilton. They wrote against each other and spoke against each other in that campaign. In August 1886, the Prohibitionists of Hinds County won their election. Just a few months later, Roderick Gambrell wrote a column in the Sword and Shield. It's a prohibition magazine, newspaper. He criticized Jones Hamilton when someone suggested he might be a good candidate to run again for the Mississippi State Senate. And I'll describe that column later in this paper. The column included so many harsh personal insults that many readers worried that Jones Hamilton would seek vengeance. Both men started carrying pistols to protect themselves. His father, J.B., warned his son, Roderick Gambrell, that going into downtown Jackson might be dangerous. The fourth question, and by the way, I've been saying for years that historians take too long explaining what they're going to do, and here I am explaining what I'm going to do. I apologize. I'm really self-righteous now about saying, no, let's tell stories, and here, no, we're setting up stories. But the fourth question is more, why did so many people seem to care? The murder trial of Jones Hamilton turned into months-long public drama about the possible meaning of innocence. So the many people who sympathized with Roderick Gambrell, the young victim was a martyr, an innocent Christian martyr, a young innocent Christian martyr who died for a cause associated with religion and home life and freedom of the press. They saw the killing as an assassination that followed from the corruption and maybe the failure of Mississippi government. The killing raised questions like, couldn't people resolve conflict without hatred and violence? How was it that people with power could get away with almost anything? Reacting to the killing and eventually the not guilty verdict, many of the newspapers said something that occasionally sounds familiar. They felt shame. A contributor to Sword and Shield after the killing wrote, "We for the first time will always blush to say we live in Mississippi." Jones Hamilton, when he was in the news, it was often because somebody said he was guilty. Financial corruption, opposing prohibition, abusing convicts in the penitentiary, committing murder. His critics said he was a leading figure in three groups that deserved condemnation, and all of them called rings: the penitentiary ring, the whiskey ring, and the courthouse ring. And if you're in three rings, there's a lot of people who are not real happy with you. When historians discuss Hamilton, as they have, they tend to emphasize questions of guilt, not always assuming guilt or arguing, but emphasize questions of guilt. The historians, some of the historians who've dealt most with Hamilton are the historians of penitentiary life, especially leading up to the history of Parchman Plantation. There's a very nice dissertation from the University of Southern Mississippi which emphasizes the prohibition press, so emphasizes the people talking about Jones Hamilton's guilt. The survey of the period by Stephen Cresswell has a very nice story about the trial. The Mississippi Distilled exhibit by your colleagues here in the unfortunate time period of 2020, 2021 had material immediately relevant, and I found out today that our friend Peter Barbiance's book on the Greenwood Cemetery has material on Jones Hamilton, where he and most of his lawyers are buried. What I want to do is to look at not to start with the question of guilt, but to start with those people who were celebrating him, and to start with the arguments that he and his supporters made about why he saw himself, why he saw him as an innocent person. And the goal is not to defend him. The goal is to see how people defended him. I'm going to try to be brief about background, but that background is important. Who Jones Hamilton is, he was born in 1833. I will go back and have his face. Born in 1833, wealthy, the child and grandson of wealthy slave-owning people in Wilkinson County in West Feliciana Parish, Louisiana. In the county and the parish, enslaved people made up about 80% of the population. Jones Hamilton was the grandson of Duncan Stewart, Mississippi's first lieutenant governor. His own father, William S. Hamilton, had been a candidate for governor in Louisiana. If he wanted, Jones Hamilton could trace the Stuart ancestry back to Scottish kings, the Stuarts, the start of Robert the Bruce, even in the 1300s, was a direct descendant. He was well educated. He expected to become a cotton growing slave owner himself. He was moving that way in the late 1850s with buying land and enslaved men and women on credit, using the family name, married a cousin, Carrie Stewart, expected to be a Whig Party plantation owner of enslaved workers. Several crises of health. Father died in a mental institution. His wife died in childbirth. Financial crises in the family, right up against the start of the Civil War. And so he changed his life dramatically. Apparently, he said much later that he had not supported secession, which goes along with a number of the wealthy in southwest Mississippi. But he joined the Confederacy with the beginning of the war, fought briefly in the Confederacy, then moved to Jackson, lived in Jackson virtually all the rest of his life. He became the Adjutant General for Mississippi in the Confederacy, which I had to learn. The Adjutant General means dealing with the details of military movement, recruitment, rules. He frequently wrote letters saying, "The governor directed me to inform you that." He ended the war as a colonel in J.L. Powers' brigade in Virginia. He went by the name Colonel Hamilton the rest of his life, which was the name that his father went by as well. He learned at least one important lesson in the Civil War. That is, he learned that there are benefits of staying close to people in power, because my goodness, he did that as best he could for the rest of his life. At the end of the Civil War, the precise end of the Civil War, Mississippi sent a delegation of 2 to meet with President Andrew Johnson. Jones Hamilton went along. He was the secretary of William Sharkey. When Andrew Johnson appointed William Sharkey as provisional governor, Jones Hamilton became his aide-de-camp. Just counting quickly, Adjutant General, aide-de-camp in the Confederacy, aide-de-camp. In the next few years, there we go, Jones Hamilton tried all sorts of things. He seems in some ways to be a stereotypical New South business person, has some money, invested here, tries this, moved away from the plantation and lives in the city, I won't go into those tried cotton buying. He ran a hotel, the hotel that ran gambling, horse racing, in New Orleans. He was very important in the restarting of the state fair. He loved breeding and showing livestock. Experimented with gasoline, with a steamboat. He did a lot of railroad investing, which he did for the rest of his life. He and J.L. Powers were the first people to do something that Mississippians have been doing since, that a lot of people have been doing since, to try to write a history of the Civil War. He learned pretty quickly that writing history is not a route to wealth, and so that book never came. What's interesting, what's unique about Jones Hamilton's life during Reconstruction is that he worked with so many different parts of government. He became a Democrat. He went to Democratic events. He opposed the Republican Party. He hung out with and went to committee meetings with Democratic leaders. And he worked in offices with Republicans. His old party, the Whig Party, had fallen apart, but he took on jobs that eventually meant that he was criticized as a scalawag. He was the city clerk in Jackson, working for the mayor, John McGill. I apologize that I had to learn through this process that Jackson had a Republican mayor until 1888. John McGill was a Northerner, a U.S. Military veteran. His clerk, his city clerk, doing routine paperwork, was Jones Hamilton. If you think that's enough, while all those businesses he did, no, it's not. He worked at the very same time as deputy auditor for the state of Mississippi. His boss there, W.H. Gibbs, Northerner, Republican, U.S. military veteran. When newspapers and government sources ran lists of Mississippi state officials in the mid-1870s, Governor Adelbert Ames, Lieutenant Governor Alexander Davis, then Secretary of State, then the Secretary of Education, then the auditor, and then Deputy Auditor Jones Hamilton. He's the only Democrat. He was the only Democrat on the list. He did investigations of so-called corruption. He saw himself as this hardworking bureaucrat. Why that's particularly intriguing, of course, is that the Democrats accused the Republicans repeatedly and aggressively of government corruption. Jones Hamilton is working in that office. He saw himself as a guy who was standing up for honesty, and that we need this office. It's some of those other offices out there that the government is spending too much money on and wasting tax dollars to give jobs to black voters, they said, and to give favors to northern corporations, they said, like the railroads. Jones Hamilton said it's his job to watch out to oppose government corruption from within the government. On the question of violence and race in politics, the question so central to Reconstruction and especially to the controversies about the end of Reconstruction, once again, Jones Hamilton had a unique place for a Democrat to be. In 1875, the Republican governor, Adelbert Ames, controversially started a new group, the Mississippi State Militia, which used the old idea of community groups that trained together, that received weapons from the government, and were ready to fight when necessary. Adelbert Ames said the militia was necessary to fight against groups of white men who were intimidating black men trying to vote or trying to campaign. I suspect that Kadada Williams next week, standing right here, will be talking about that much more thoroughly. Ames said that the state needed militias that were well trained and prepared and ready to go fight when there was intimidation, most obviously in Vicksburg and Yazoo City and in Clinton, and less obviously in intimidation that did not lead to overt violence. In response, the Democrats started Democratic conservative clubs that said just the opposite. They started to oppose what they considered a corrupt and illegitimate government that they said was led by black men, led by outsiders, corrupt from within and outside, supported by the force of the U.S. military. The new Mississippi State Militia in 1875 had 8 brigadier generals, 7 Republicans, and Jones Hamilton, the only Democrat, one more time. And critics said then, but especially they said later, how in the world, Democrat, wealthy ex-Confederate, do you join the Mississippi State Militia? At one point, pardon me while I'm proud of myself that I've to go from one form of paper to another. And there it is. What do you know? This will not happen this entire lecture, but at one point the intrigue of the insider nature of Jones Hamilton's life became more pronounced. A man named James Duncan Stewart, a lawyer in Jackson, a native of Wilkinson County, Jones Hamilton's business partner and cousin, filed a lawsuit in the Mississippi court system challenging the legality of the Mississippi State Militia. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of Mississippi taxpayers. It said that the state did not have authority to fund a state militia because the legislation that formed it prevented it from spending more than $5,000 a year. Why that's interesting at this moment is that James Duncan Stewart, I'll say that again. James Duncan Stewart didn't mention his cousin, but it pointed out Jones Hamilton's unique role in state government because James Duncan Stewart addressed his lawsuit to the state auditor, demanding that W.H. Gibbs stop funding for the militia. And so that meant that the cousin and business partner of Jones Hamilton was suing the boss of Jones Hamilton to stop funding for a militia group for whom Jones Hamilton had been a brigadier general. And it's just this unique situation of a Democrat who's an insider among Republicans. I'm looking at the time, and I'm going to skip quickly to the backstory of Roderick Gambrell, which is way easier to tell. He died at age 22. But how did he end up on the Town Creek Bridge where he died in 1887? He was born in 1865. His parents, father, Baptist minister from Mississippi, mother, Mary, that his father met in Virginia while his father was a Confederate scout. They named him Roderick Gambrell. Here, and I need to get back to there. Roderick Dhu is a character from Lady of the Lake by Walter Scott, 200 and something page series of rhyming couplets that was popular among antebellum Southern readers. Roderick Dhu as a character is a Scottish fighter who fights against the king, is a kind of romantic character and dies in the end. It was a name that had lots of meanings for people, for Confederates just at the end of the Civil War. His father, J.B. Gambrell, came back and became a preacher, Northeast Mississippi, West Point, Oxford, Clinton, Jackson. He said that he had at one point an epiphany in the woods that told him, give up your Confederate hatreds. It's your job as a minister to anybody. Put your weapons down and never pick them back up. He became a prohibitionist very shortly after he became the editor of the Baptist Record. He started in 1879. Mary T. Gambrell wrote intriguing columns about women and family life, asked what women could do to save the souls of the unsaved. You know, if men were getting all the attention in revival meetings and in sermons, what could women do? She said that parents needed to be friends to their children, not authority figures. She was very interested in the biblical story of Mary and Martha. Mary, who showed love and attention to Jesus just before his assassination, while Martha was kind of complaining about doing housework. And Mary Gambrell tried to find a way to merge the two. And she, even more interesting, wrote columns called Anointing Aforehand, said that what we need to do is recognize that our children might die before us. We need to treat them with love and the metaphorical anointing with oil in case they die too young. Roderick Gambrell became a Christian churchgoer in 1877. So as he was working out what that meant, his parents were prohibitionists, educators. Mary Gambrell sent this picture to Francis E. Willard, the president of the WCTU. On the back, there, that was James B. Gambrell, Roderick's father. And on the back, Mary said, born, assassinated, began his journalistic career when only 19 years old, joined the Baptist Church when 12, was faithful unto death. And I saw that as the essential information. Now, how do we get quickly to the shooting? There was lots of controversy about the Prohibition election. Roderick Gambrell is a prohibitionist, a prohibition editor, and was openly, aggressively the people he did not like, he was aggressive about it. He said that he's not like his dad, who is calm and kind of loving. He's not like his mother, who wants to merge different sentiments. He saw himself more as a fighting editor, and he was. During the Prohibition election, the local option election of 1886. One of the most intriguing things, and I need to just say this really quickly and clearly, one of the intriguing things was the height of the language, but especially the way that both sides accused the other of reliving the end of Reconstruction, reliving the Mississippi Plan, reliving the worst sides of the end of Reconstruction. The Prohibitionists said that, including Roderick Gambrell, the Prohibitionists said that the anti-Prohibitionists were buying off black men's votes. They said that they even said that the anti-Prohibitionists were gathering guns to support black men's votes, and they said that the anti-Prohibitionists, like Jones Hamilton, were continuing the power and the practices of the Republicans, that they rely on black men's votes, that they work with Republicans like the Mayor McGill here in Jackson. They said that the Prohibitionists said also that, very aggressively said, that the anti-Prohibitionists were tools of corporate interests. They added that Jones Hamilton in particular was, as the head of the convict lease system, head of the penitentiary, added that Jones Hamilton was the tools of two types of corporate interests, giving away government favors and protecting the interest of the liquor industry and the railroad industry that relied on convict labor. In response, let's see if I can find as quickly as possible. In response, this group, like I said, this is an obscure group and deserves our attention. The Central Anti-Prohibition Club of Jackson had a manifesto, that said that prohibition was a sumptuary law. In the tradition of European sumptuary law, said that prohibition was fanatical, that it pretended to be religious, but it forced one particular set of moral codes on everybody else. Said that people have drank alcohol. That alcohol has been popular for centuries. Who do we think we are as human beings in the 1880s to say that that's no longer possible? They said the taxes funded education. They had, I think, ultimately 11 points, but that's a reasonable beginning. Part of what's so interesting is that the leaders of the Central Anti-Prohibition Club of Jackson included, no surprise, a bunch of people who sold alcohol, but included a kind of diverse representation of different groups. Of the 11 men who either spoke at their meetings or were on the executive committee, 2 were black men, 2 were Jewish leaders, Catholic leaders, Jones Hamilton, Episcopalian, 1 was a Presbyterian. The critics of the Anti-Prohibition Club noticed that none were women, and they were right. And the critics, the historian, notices that none were Methodist or Baptists. And I'd say that those of us who assume that you start with Methodists and Baptists and talking about Southern religious history, this is a conflict. This was a moment of argument. I would reemphasize that when people criticized Jones Hamilton, they called him a friend of Republicans. They called him a friend of corporations. They called him corrupt. They didn't just say, we don't like the convict lease system or anti-prohibition. Roderick Gambrell, I'll get to the shooting in 1 second. Roderick Gambrell, in his column that criticized Jones Hamilton that led to the shooting, led to the conflict that led to the shooting. Said it referred to the very unmilitary Colonel Jones Hamilton. So his first shot was saying he's not a very good military figure, even if he calls himself colonel. It called him the head of the penitentiary ring, who used his closeness to the governor, Governor Lowry, to embezzle funds. Reminded people of the cruelty of convict labor, especially in building railroads. It continued that when Hamilton was in the state senate, he made a lot of policies that benefited his own company, so it was kind of double dipping in government and that making policies that benefited him in other ways. And finally, he emphasized that Hamilton worked with Republicans, kept up fellowship with the most corrupt element in the county that had supported corrupt radical rule. That was April 23rd. May 5 was the shooting on Capitol Street. And exactly what happened is the point of controversy. And that will be the rest of my talk, and I will summarize it as quickly as I possibly can and get to questions. What you're seeing is a historian who has so much to say that he's given all the background before he gets to the main story. And so if you're recognizing that I've done this long enough, I shouldn't be in this position, yeah, you're right. And I apologize for that. The shooting was May 5. I'll have that there because it's even more intriguing. The first trial, the coroner's inquest, started immediately, and the 5 men were arrested. Here we go. 5 men. The trial deserves John Grisham. The trial deserves somebody with legal training and interest in drama, and by heavens, it's interesting. There's a special built-in drama because Jones Hamilton, if he were convicted, he would be sent to the state penitentiary that he had been charged of. And so there was that extra little excitement. Gambrell died from gunshots on the bridge. Jones Hamilton, 2 employees, Mims Eubank and Tom Hardy, one good friend, J.W. Albrecht, and a friend of Albrecht's, William Figures, were all arrested. The prosecution said there was good evidence of murder through conspiracy of the 5 men, that they had planned it. They said that there were lots of witnesses who heard somebody on the bridge yell. First, they were shooting, then they heard someone on the bridge yell, "Murder, murder." And they saw some of Hamilton's friends walking in multiple directions. Apologies for trying to do this too quickly, and I'll get to the main points. Over the next, that was in May. There are hearings in June and July. There's a change of venue to August. By the time the trial started, the next February, one by one, the 4 co-conspirators first were let out on bail, which Hamilton was never let out on bail, and one by one, the courts released them null pros for some of them, just dropped charges, saying that, yeah, the prosecution thinks that there's a conspiracy, but it can't prove who done it. It can't prove that they were part of it, but they know that Jones Hamilton shot and killed Roderick Gambrell. The trial itself in February, March, April of 1888 took 51 days, 130-something witnesses, lawyers who love to talk, the large crowds who went to Brandon. The prosecution called back the witnesses from the coroner's jury They had lots of witnesses who heard a man in the dark yelling, "Murder, murder." One witness said Hamilton had made a special effort to get a pistol that day. There are lots of prosecution witnesses made 3 big points. They said Hamilton was angry about the editorial, wanted revenge. They said he'd asked friends to keep an eye out for Roderick and also J.B. Gambrell. And third, they said that some of his friends and he were at the station that night watching to see who got off the train. This is the pink on the far left is the train, and this is the west end of West Capitol. That's the Edwards House Hotel where he made the speech. Those buildings there above are mostly the businesses of the people who were in the Central Anti-Prohibition Club of Jackson. So as Roderick Gambrell got off the train that night and walked up West Capitol, he was kind of running a gauntlet of people who didn't like him. And so there was this sense that people were looking at him or mad at him, and that they conspired to kill him on the bridge. 2 witnesses placed friends of Hamilton on the bridge itself. One, a lawyer named James, had been the star witness at the coroner's jury. He said he could hear shootings, then murder, then lots of shootings, too fast to come from pistols. He argued that he could tell by hearing that the shooters formed in what he called in the shape of a trapezoid, that he could hear men in the shape of a trapezoid. The other witness was, he was a white lawyer. The other witness, Nellie Dinkins, was a black woman who lived near the bridge, and she claimed to see 2 of Hamilton's friends walking toward the bridge just before the shooting started. The defense argument was real simple. They said that yes, Jones Hamilton shot and killed Gambrell, but Gambrell shot first, and Hamilton defended himself. Yeah, they were angry at each other. Yeah, they were armed. No, Hamilton didn't have help because he wasn't planning to shoot anybody. They tried to reject some of the prosecution testimony. They said, you can't hear a trapezoid. They said Nellie Dinkins did not have a reputation for telling the truth. They said that Hamilton, yes, he was at the train looking in the train, but it wasn't looking for Gambrell. It was looking for an old friend who was taking a trip. They tried to put in the record that Hamilton offered a ride to a friend that he met to go home that evening, with the point being that if you're offering a friend a ride, you're probably not also planning a murder. The judge said that was all hearsay. One of the more interesting spots is that right across the street from the Edwards house is the Lawrence house. The Lawrence house was owned by, that's the anglicized first name of Lorenzo Fragiacomo, a bartender who had become an owner who was so opposed to prohibition, he claimed to try to boycott anybody who supported prohibition. All along that yellow and pink line there are people that were friends of Jones Hamilton, and Hamilton clearly spent some time in the bar room of the Lawrence house on the ground floor. Somebody called it the most public place in Jackson, and I wonder today, what is the most public place in Jackson? The defense attorney said, yeah, he hung out there with his friends drinking beer. No, they weren't planning a murder. And finally, there were a bunch of character witnesses: old Confederate General Ward Adams, Joseph McGill, the mayor, Governor of Mississippi, Robert Lowry, came and said he was a man of peace. Fannie Hamilton, his wife, talked about her husband as a shooting victim. And I have to say this, to my mind, the most surprising character witness was W.W. Leake, who Hamilton had known in his early adulthood, who came up from Bayou Sara, Louisiana, to say that he had a man of good character. Newspapers show that in 1855, W.W. Leake and Jones Hamilton got into a fight, and Jones Hamilton stabbed him in the face with a Bowie knife. And I don't know if there's a T-shirt or a bumper sticker that says, "Live a life where somebody you stab with a Bowie knife comes back as your character witness," but that's exactly what happened. The trial took 51 days. The lawyers all wanted to give talks. No offense to attorneys, but the lawyers all wanted to give long talks. one day, 3 or 4 hours from each of the first two. They were so long that the foreman of the jury asked the judge, could he please ask that there be only 2 more talks from the lawyers, so that the defense lawyer for Hamilton was Anselm McLaurin. He took 7 hours. Some of you know Anselm McLaurin is the great-great-grandfather of comedian Robin Williams. And so I imagine comedian Robin Williams with a 7-hour legal defense. The prosecution took 9 hours. So if 7 hours is too long, no, 9 hours, let's take it farther. It is intriguing, and the newspapers could tell the direction things were going. That when the judge was not allowing the argument for conspiracy, and only then it meant that it's an argument about 2 men on a bridge, and the judge gave instructions that says if you believe that Gambrell shot Hamilton and Hamilton shot back in defense, then you have to acquit him, and they took an afternoon. The jury took an afternoon to rule not guilty, to lead to that celebratory moment that I led with. The newspapers said exactly what you would expect. The pro-Gambrell newspapers said, we know he's guilty. We're so glad so many people know he's guilty. The law didn't call him guilty, but we know he is convicted by the public. The pro-Hamilton newspaper said, victory over fanaticism. What happened immediately after, and I will just put this away and ask for your questions. What happened immediately after was horrible. Immediately, one of Gambrell's best friends, John Martin Jr., who edited the New Mississippian magazine, he wrote an editorial criticizing the character witnesses, saying you can't be a character witness if you have no character. He ran into, down here on Mitt Street, he ran into one of those character witnesses, and Wirt Adams, a Confederate general, an old friend, they drew their pistols, shot each other dead. There were one of the witnesses who had said that Gambrell was kind of lurking on the bridge was beaten up in Clinton. The victim said, I think I recognize one of them as a divinity student at Mississippi College. Somebody tried to burn down Gambrell's home, Hamilton's home. One of the other Prohibition editors was coming to Jackson to mourn along with the other friends of John Martin Jr., was taking the train and looking for a place to sit, turned around, and there's Jones Hamilton right in his face, who knocked him down, and Jones Hamilton's brother-in-law pulled a gun. Happily, nobody was murdered at that moment. Jones Hamilton himself, and this is, so what happened, and again, I apologize for, I'd like one of those 7-hour talks, actually. Can we do that, Chris? 9? Okay, Chris says we'll be here for 9 hours. And I apologize for going too fast for some things that deserve more attention. That's every historian has to footnote. The things that happened after were those several moments of dramatic violence that came just straight out of the trial, people being angry with each other. Jones Hamilton, in 1891, he did the most stereotypical thing a wealthy white man in the South could do. He welcomed several dozen friends to his home that he had named Belhaven for a party to celebrate the unveiling of the Confederate Memorial in 1891. So it was he became the stereotypical character in 1891. Belhaven, he owned like 600 acres, farmed. He had turned it into a suburban plantation. Some people said it was the most beautiful home in Jackson, maybe the most beautiful, biggest home in Mississippi. 1893, he had a financial crisis with the railroad, with the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad, and his friends got him to sell Belhaven to Dr. Fitzhugh, who was looking for a good place in Jackson to start a new women's college. And that's the origins of Belhaven College, when the home, the giant Belhaven mansion, burned, apparently not through arson, but they rebuilt, and Belhaven College opened in 1894. Jones Hamilton himself, and I'll just go back and catch his picture one more time. So he moved into a big house on 300 block of President Street, right over here. In 1898, finally got a job he had experience in. He became the Adjutant General for Mississippi during the U.S. war with Spain. He also had a significant fall, and in the Prohibition press, it all said, "We know why he fell. He was drunk again." The tragedy in his life, the last tragedy, 1900, his son Jones Jr. Died in a railroad accident, age 21. So the ironies of dying in the railroads that had made his family wealthy, and dying at age 21, right around the age of Roderick Gambrell. What happened to the Gambrell family? J.B. and Mary, have to mention just briefly, J.B. Gambrell became a leading figure in calling for what he called voter restriction. He said after in the Constitution, in the Constitutional Convention of 1890, J.B. Gambrell, and actually also Harriet Kells, the leading prohibitionist in the state of Mississippi, what they wanted was a prohibition amendment. If they couldn't get that, they wanted restrictions on black men's voting. They said that too many black men voted for corporate interests that supported alcohol. Hamilton died in 1907, a long life. I looked in all of his obituaries. Only one of them mentioned the Roderick Gambrell shooting and the Gambrell case, so he got away with it. My question to you is whatever questions that you might have, thank you. But also in 1887, 88, 89, the WCTU worked hard to put up a monument to Roderick Gambrell on the bridge on Capitol Street. After the trial, it was a little less likely. My question to you is should there, here at the Mississippi Department of Archive and History, should there be should we put up a historic marker about this killing? And if so, what do you say? I think a lot of people left it behind as controversial and not as clear cut as they wanted. But you know, how do we remember that? I'm delighted to tell this story, but how we remember that in a clear way is a lot harder. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to handle any questions. And again, apologies. I know I went longer than I'd planned.
It was incredibly interesting. So I have an obsession with Oliver Cromwell, who was the head of the Colored Farmers Alliance and had a relationship with Jones Hamilton and was a witness. Can you say anything about his relationship with either Cromwell or the Colored Farmers Alliance?
I can't. I know that there was one, but I will do what academics generally do and talk around that question. I think that prohibition was an extraordinarily controversial and meaningful and important political issue, and it frustrates me that populism attracts attention that prohibition frequently does not. The leading white populist, Frank Burkett, was very much anti-Hamilton, but there were a lot of black leaders who recognized, the friendship with the Republicans, with the difficulties with the Democrats, and so he had kind of unlikely alliances with a lot of people. I wish I knew more about that, but thank you. But if I had the 9-hour version, I wouldn't do it any better. But, yes.
I really enjoyed your presentation, but I would, in answer to your question, should there be a monument? I'm going to say no, because there were no heroes in this episode.
That's what I tend to think. You know, a monument would be tough. They wanted a monument to Roderick Gambrell, martyr, and but a historic marker would be a different question.
Okay, my question is, okay, Mississippi started selling liquor legally in 1966 in my lifetime. So did this murder have anything to do to push for the prohibition of liquor in Mississippi? Because I don't know what year this.
The statewide prohibition started in 1907. That's 20 years later. In between those 20 years, lots of different counties and states passed local option elections, and people passed all sorts of, you know, the kind of compromise, you know, voting or zoning by time and place, but there were a few leaders who remembered and kept it up. The Gambrells themselves moved on, J.B. and Mary moved on to Georgia and then Texas. He was an important figure there. So the quick answer that I've already failed to give is no, not really, but it was a kind of high point in controversy.
Quick testimony.
This is not a question. This is quick. Thank you very much, Dr. Ownby. Dr. Ownby was the chairman of my doctoral dissertation at Ole Miss in the 1990s. And I want to publicly again say thank you so much for your effort, your time, your sacrifice, your hard work with me that enabled me to achieve my goal and have a doctorate. It's because of your effort that I was able to achieve my dream. Thank you so much. Keep the good work up.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. That's Dr. Gordon Daniels, who taught at Mississippi Valley State and works here at the two museums. And it was a pleasure to work with Dr. Daniels. And I'll also mention that that Gordon was one of the last people I knew to get to sign on to email, and so that I would get calls. Hi, Dr. Ownby, and I knew exactly what it was because the things that, but it was a delight, and I'm glad we're still working on history.
We've gone a little over,
Sorry, my
but
fault.
Ted will be glad to answer any questions anybody may have. And would you say just a word or two about the larger book project that this is going to be a part of?
In a sentence or two, it's a series of chapters on relatively obscure moments or individuals that are stories, but all of them centered around kind of on a new controversy about questions of innocence. So it's instead of starting with saying let's find the villains, it says let's see how people understood themselves to be innocent of villainy or accusation. So it's I'm having a great time with it because because there's so much evidence and there's so much research to do, it doesn't have like the conclusion. It's a series of stories. Sure. Thank you.
Well, we'll look forward to reading that when it's published, to having you back. Thank you all for being here. I hope that we'll see you next week when Kadada Williams will be with us to talk about her new book on Reconstruction. Don't forget, Makers Fest is free and is this Saturday. For now, help me thank Ted Ownby for this fantastic program today.
Thank you for coming.